On the day when my son needed a blood transfusion due to a car accident. It happened that the young master of the Cheng family was in the hospital. The blood bank was in an emergency. He rolled up his sleeves and was about to ask the nurse to draw blood from him. I grabbed his hand with a pale face and said nervously, "Sean can't donate. Let someone else donate." The man's eyes looking at me suddenly became unfathomable. "Xia, what exactly are you hiding from me? I saw Sean again on a late night 3 weeks ago. When I hung up the fuel nozzle, several luxury cars slowly drove into the gas station. Fill up with 98 octane. Thank you." The man's voice was slightly hoarse. With the fatigue after getting drunk, I took the fuel card from the designated driver, pressed the button and picked up the fuel nozzle. "Hey, isn't this Xia?" A slightly surprised voice rang out from the side, followed by whispers of recognition of me. "Damn, it really seems to be Xia." "Xia? Which Xia?" "The one who dumped young Master Cheng." The gaze from the one-way window made my back stiffen slightly. I lowered my head, clenched the fuel nozzle tightly with my hand, and my fingertips turned slightly white. Unexpectedly, after 5 years, I would meet Sean again in this way. It was a bit unexpected, and also a bit inopportune. Someone explained, "We just finished our class reunion. We were planning to fill up the gas and go to the next place. We didn't expect to meet you. It's really been a long time." Xia. Looking at my former classmates in their elegant clothes and having achieved success, I pulled my work clothes tighter around me and stood in the cold wind, smiling awkwardly. "Long time no see. Xia. Why are you here? Why are you wearing so little in such cold weather? Since we met, do you want to have a drink or two with us later?" Someone bombarded me with a series of questions. Someone else impatiently yelled at him, "You're so stupid. It's obvious that she's working here. Drink. Drink. Why don't you drink yourself to death? Hey. You brat." The two of them laughed and joked, making a commotion, and everyone watched with smiles. The brief shift of attention finally gave me a moment to catch my breath. I raised my eyes and stared at the fuel tank. My attention began to scatter as the constantly jumping numbers. I know that they said those on purpose. Not only for me to hear, but also for Sean to hear. And even more to mock my stupidity back then. For a mere 50,000 yuan. I gave up Sean with a promising future and threw myself into someone else's arms. Xia, if you hadn't broken up with young Master Cheng back then, you wouldn't be suffering from the cold here now. That's right. If there hadn't been that incident back then, you would be the mistress of this car now. After the horseplay, they began to recall the past again. The more they talked, the more traces of time cracking. Looking at Sean at the center of the topic. He was sitting in the Panamera in front of me. The car window was half down. There was not a trace of emotion on his face. Those cold and indifferent eyes fell on me. He remained silent all along. Time is like a hand hidden in the darkness. In a moment of distraction or trance, everything changes. In the night, I was like a puppet with mechanical gears installed. Standing numbly, I felt as if I had been looking at Sean for a long time. But when time passed by my shoulder, it told me that it was just a brief moment. What broke this silence was the female voice coming from beside Sean. She seemed to have just been sleeping. There was a hint of drowsiness in her voice. "Sean, what's going on? What are they arguing about outside?" That was a very delicate and gentle woman. She was sitting on the other side of Sean. When she got up, I could even see her soft hair brushing against his coat. Sean slightly turned his head and looked back. He changed his previous indifference and responded gently. "Nothing. Just met an old acquaintance." Old acquaintance. These two light words made the woman interested and leaned out. She seemed to have recognized me and suddenly her eyes lit up. "So you are Xia." She gave me a calm and generous smile. "I've heard so much about you. I'm sure that in my memory, I don't know this woman named Quinn in front of me." So I listened calmly as she introduced herself to me. Calmly watched as she told me with a hint of in her eyes, I am Sean's fiancé. Speaking of which, I should thank you. If you hadn't given up Sean back then, I might not have known such a good fiancé. The night wind is always cold and unrestrained. Sean glanced sideways at her faintly. Why are you bringing this up? It's all in the past. His tone was a bit impatient, but there was no sign of rebuke in his expression. Naturally, the woman was not angry. She gave a playful smile and blinked at me apologetically, as if saying to me, "You see, he has such a bad temper." She had fair skin and a dimple at the corner of her mouth when she smiled, looking rather innocent and lovely. Even before leaving, she didn't forget to ask me with good intentions, "Sure, yeah. Do you want to get in the car and come with us to play for a while? Later, I can ask Sean to send you home." Just a simple sentence brought everyone's attention back to me again. People who haven't experienced life's twists and turns always love to play these tricks. It was the same in the past, and it is still the same now. I avoided Sean's gaze that fell on me again and shook my head. After handing the gas card to the designated driver according to the process, I said softly, "No. I still have to pick up my child and go home after work." At 3, Sean rolled up the car window and left. When I told Mia about it later, she was somewhat indignant. "Why did he give you the cold shoulder? If it weren't for him back then, how could you have stayed in that place for 3 years?" She was so angry that she could barely form a complete sentence and almost smashed the water cup on the table. I took the cup from her hand and waved for my son, who was hiding behind the door, to come and comfort her for me. My son immediately ran out of the room happily and started to act Coca-Cola in a childish voice while hugging her leg. "Auntie, I miss you so much. Auntie, why are you angry? Auntie, don't be unhappy. Who bullied Dante? Dylan will avenge you." At the end, my son's small, rolling eyes turned, and he added, "If it really doesn't work, Dylan can prefer meeting a durian hole for you." In the end, Mia couldn't hold back her laughter. "I'll buy it. Auntie will buy you durianess. Don't act for Auntie anymore." She gave me a sideways glance. "Look at your good son. He's tricking people for food and drink." I smiled and took my son from her arms and pinched the soft flesh on his belly. My heart, which had been suspended all day, gradually calmed down. But then again, didn't Sean ask about the child? No. What could he ask? He knows nothing. It was only in the 3rd month after I broke up with him that I found out I was pregnant with Dylan. "Then why did you mention the child?" "Because he will find out sooner or later. Sean will look into me. I know him too well. So I took the initiative to mention the child, and let him misunderstand that I am already married and have a child. This is exactly the result I want. But the fact that he is the child's biological father." "It's okay, Mia," I interrupted her. "I have changed Dylan's household registration. Even if he thinks in this direction, he will only think that I am deceiving him. He won't pursue my matter to the end. Sean has his own pride. After all, our breakup was so ugly. At that time, all his friends were scolding me for being heartless. Chia, you are really a jerk. Master Chang likes you so much. His injury hasn't healed yet. He got out of bed and ran to see you as soon as he had the pain-killing injection. Just for 50,000 yuan. You treat him like this? It's raining so heavily outside. If he gets soaked again, something will happen." But in response to them, there was still my indifference. Sean and I once started passionately, but later ended bitterly. When mentioned again, there is only resentment. Some things are in the past. Just because time passes doesn't mean there is an opportunity to make up for all the missed things and regrets. This truth has been deeply engraved in my heart during those 3 years in prison. Moreover, even if Sean knows everything now, so what? What impact can it have? Thinking of the figure I saw in the car today, I hugged my son tightly in my arms and held back the soreness in the corners of my eyes. "Mia, he has a fiancé. They have a very good relationship. He and I are long past. For life always goes on. With Mia's help in many ways. I finally got a part-time job at a golf course with a high hourly wage. The gas station is the policy-based help given to me according to my situation after I was released from prison. As long as it is arranged properly on weekdays, it can ensure a living. But for a mother, she always thinks a little more. Earn a little more. As long as it's just a little bit more. I can buy Dylan his favorite durian. In fact, after coming out of prison, my job search has not been smooth. Every time before starting a new job and undergoing background checks, I would be called in by HR for a talk. Sorry. Our company does not accept employees with criminal records. In the past 2 years, I have washed dishes and served food. I have carried cement and worked in nightclubs. I have also counted how to eat boiled noodles with salt water that cost you on a bunch for a week. I haven't collapsed due to the confusion of being disconnected from society for 3 years. Nor have I collapsed due to physical exhaustion. Nor have I collapsed due to mental torture. But the only thing that makes me collapse is the first time I found that Dylan stole the thread I put in the cabinet. Dylan develops later than ordinary children. A 3-year-old child holding money in his hand actually doesn't know how to spend it. He will just hold it in his hand and throw it around like a celestial maiden scattering flowers. Imitating something vaguely. After listening and distinguishing several times, I finally understood that he was telling me, that day, the neighbor's brother did like this, and bought a lot of delicious food. A lot of delicious food. Mom. It's hard for me to describe my lament at that moment. I only remember a loud bang in my mind, making my vision go blank. By the time I came to my senses, I was already holding my ignorant son and crying uncontrollably. Crying until there was a sharp pain in my heart. Later, I quit all odd jobs and moved away from the shared apartment that cost $300 on a month with Dylan. When I was a child, my mother told me the story of Mania's mother moving 3 times. I didn't understand. I found faults everywhere and thought that Mania's mother was really pretentious. Until I had Dylan. I found that it is so easy to draw on a blank sheet of paper without parents' company. So I changed my mind of working hard to earn money and accompanied my son to grow up as much as I could. Although I am not a philosopher and my life is not a success. But I will tell my son what should and should not be in life. And Mia, when I was holding my son's hand and buying vegetables in the vegetable market, she pointed at my nose, crying and laughing, and scolded me bitterly. Cheria. You bad woman. You still know to come back. She is just such a hot-tempered person. 5. The teacher said that my son had a fight with someone at school. Under the annoyed expression of the foreman, I apologized several times again. Quickly changed my clothes and hurried in the direction of the kindergarten. I thought that after parting at the gas station last time, Sean and I would have no more intersections. Unexpectedly, when I rushed to the school, what I saw was the scene of my son glaring at him with red eyes. To be exact, he was glaring at the little boy hiding behind Sean. I held my son in my arms and listened to the teacher tell me the whole story. Perhaps it's because Sean has a too strong aura. Or perhaps being rich and powerful always makes people distort everything. The teacher's tone was somewhat biased. The cause was that the boy called Dylan a bastard, and a child without a father. Later, he mentioned me again. My mother said that your mother is a prostitute. The language system of children of this age mostly comes from the family. I have seen the parents of that boy. When I participated in the parent-child day before, because the man took a few more glances at me, he was scolded severely by his wife. She also sneered at me who was wearing shorts in summer. At that time, Mia was by my side. She has always been one to protect me. Mia scolded the two of them terribly. She was so angry that the woman fainted on the spot and was sent to the hospital. Thinking about it, this is also the consequence of the last incident. I just don't know what role Sean played in it. Dylan and that child fought with each other and accidentally knocked out one of the boy's deciduous teeth. So Sean, whose gaze had been on me since I came in, slowly opened his mouth. Your son? Yes. Silence. Continued silence. The stalemate lasted until the teacher piled up a smile and came up to greet me lowly, and began to introduce Sean to me. Only then did I know. It turned out that the little boy was the child of a relative of his fiancée. No wonder he is here. Well, Dylan's mother. Your son has injured another child. Let's not mention the education issue first. The teacher didn't mention the problem of that boy at all. Where is the child's father? Sean ignored her and interrupted. He was asking me. Dead. That person? Yes. He was asking about the person I made up randomly when we broke up. Silence. Again. Silence. The silence continued until there was still no expression on Sean's face. But 2 minutes later, he suddenly stood up. I saw him drag the little boy hiding behind him and walk in front of Dylan. Then he bent down and said sarcastically, "Then he is not wrong. You are indeed a bastard." I suddenly looked up at him and saw the cold arc on his lips. At that moment, I was extremely angry. I suddenly raised my hand and slapped him, sneering at him. Which wild father gave birth to you? A bastard? The power of this slap seemed very great. Not only did it slap Sean's head to one side, but it also caused the teacher to let out a sharp exclamation. The office was in chaos. I turned around, picked up my son, and left without looking back. Mia said loudly, "He said this to Dylan in person?" I held my sleeping son and motioned for her to be quieter. Mia sneered. Interesting. Very interesting. She was so angry that she laughed instead. I really want to see what kind of expression Sean will have when he knows that Dylan is his son. I won't let him know. I put my son back in the room, closed the door and said softly, "I transferred my son to a kindergarten. New friends. New environment." He was no longer criticized by his peers. But Sean found my new workplace. The manager asked me to be his exclusive caddy. Shall you go instead of me? Sure. The manager snorted coldly and said sarcastically, "The guest personally named you. If you don't want to go, just resign and go home." I pursed my lips, bowed my head and apologized to him, then turned and went to the VIP room. Sean was sitting on the sofa smoking. When he saw me coming in, he pointed to the documents placed on the coffee table. I walked over, squatted down, and flipped through them. "What do you mean?" It was a prenuptial agreement document. He didn't look at me. He let the flame pass over the cigarette butt, emitting a scarlet light. "Let's get married." I closed the contract. "I refuse." "Don't you look at the conditions?" "I refuse no matter what the conditions are." He laughed softly. "Why? Are you so greedy now? Once 50,000 yuan could buy you. Now 30 million yuan is not enough?" I looked up and looked at him somewhat strangely. After 5 years, Sean's eyebrows and eyes have become more mature. The once rebellious teenager has also learned to restrain his expression in the years. He lit another cigarette, letting the bluish-white smoke fill the room with a bitter taste. He put forward his negotiation conditions to me. "Shiya. The child needs a father. Growth also needs funds. As long as you sign this agreement, I can give him the best educational resources and the best growth path. And..." He paused. "No one will say that he is a bastard without a father anymore." This last sentence made me smile inexplicably. Undoubtedly, this condition is very tempting. 30 million is enough to buy me and Dylan several lifetimes. But Sean, Dylan won't need a mother who is kept by someone already engaged. Why still cause trouble? 9 Zia. You will agree, Sean said to me that day. And the way he said I would agree is to clock in at the place where I work every day. He is used to making others humiliate me. People in high positions always know how to whip others' self-esteem. He didn't name me to be his caddy. Instead, he watched his companions order me around in various ways. Endless items to carry. Constantly backtracking on the road. Shoes have to be wiped on one's knees. Wine has to be drunk. Even the sweet pastries given as rewards must be eaten with a smile on one's face. I turned on the faucet, wiped my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. Thin, pale, and lifeless. The eyes are rather prominent on the bony face. I suddenly remembered Sean's fiancée I saw at the gas station. Anyone with discerning eyes can see that we two are very similar. She has a pair of round eyes as big as mine. It's just a pity that her eyes are clear and gentle. My eyes are worldly and tired. Those once beautiful emotions, and the way of looking at the world no longer belong to me now. I hung my head and smiled. Then dried the water on my face. After gathering my emotions, I turned around and entered the reception room again. 10 This continuous forced drinking continues. Sean sits at one end of the sofa, playing with a lighter. Everyone present looks at each other in dismay. Just because they know it's his intention. They don't know if they should increase the intensity. Until he stops his movements and glances at them lightly. Everyone immediately starts yelling again and starts persuading me to drink. I have no emotions. I raise my hand and take one glass after another. I know that he just wants to see me in this shameless state. He wants to take revenge on me. Revenge for my heartlessness towards him on that rainy night 5 years ago. Also revenge for my rejection of him, a few days ago. Chia, do you really think I can't live without you? If it weren't for seeing you, and your son pitiful, and I give you this opportunity. But you are so lofty. Nowadays, really anyone can enter the golf course. Even a woman with a child can come and be a caddy. He is threatening me with my job. I lower my eyes and force a smile. Yes, you are right. This glass of wine is my apology to you. I drink glass after glass. And he just sits quietly and watches. In a trance. I hear the phone ringing again. That was set by Dylan for me. He said it was the theme song of his favorite Paw Patrol. Sean looks down at me condescending. Answer it. I get up from the stool, wipe my face, and answer the phone. Gia, what should we do? Dylan has had a car accident and is being rescued inside now. Come quickly. Jaya. Mia's anxious and choked voice comes from the other end. Suddenly, I only feel a darkness in front of my eyes and almost fall to the ground. Sean supports me. He asks me in a deep voice. What's wrong? I look at him blankly and suddenly grab his sleeve, suppressing the trembling that keeps coming from my body. Sean, help me. My son had a car accident and is in the hospital. Take me there. Please help me and take me there. 77 The golf course is on the outskirts of City A. It's very far from the city center. Sean drives in silence. He speeds all the way. At nearly 7 o'clock. He stops at the main entrance of the hospital. I tremble as I unfasten my seat belt, trying to control my panic and run in. Mia is pacing back and forth outside the operating room. Seeing me, she immediately runs over. Chia. It's all my fault. I didn't take good care of Dylan. When she picked up Dylan from school, she was waiting for the light to cross the road. During this period, she lowered her head and replied to a message. Unexpectedly, when she looked up, she saw a drunk driver lose control of the vehicle and hit her and Dylan on the side of the road. Mia is fine. They are all minor injuries. But Dylan has been pushed into this emergency room with closed doors. Mia still wants to say something. Suddenly, the door of the emergency room is pushed open. The doctor takes off his mask and anxiously asks us, "Who among you is type-O blood? The patient has massive bleeding and we don't have enough blood. Hurry up and find someone to donate some." As soon as I hear this, I immediately panic. Type-O blood. Type-O blood. I'm not. And Mia isn't either. Who is it? Who is it? I panic and take out my phone and start looking through my contacts, thinking which friend has the same blood type as Dylan. But the more I look, the more chaotic it becomes. The more anxious I am. The more I can't remember. Tears blur my vision. Just at this moment, an arm stretches out from behind. Sean, who hasn't spoken since he came in, takes off his suit jacket. While rolling up his sleeves, he steps forward and says, "Take mine." I just had a physical examination a while ago. There is no problem with my blood and it is also typo. After the nurse hears this, she is about to step forward. But suddenly I think of something and hurriedly and chitically grab his wrist. In the puzzled eyes of everyone, I swallow and say nervously, Sean can't donate. Let someone else donate. Why? After hearing my words, Sean turned to look at me. His eyes were dark and suddenly unfathomable. 12 I had a dream. I dreamed of that lay taught him 5 years ago. Sean was injured while playing racing. When I went to see him with the well-cooked soup, he was losing his temper in the ward. Am I going to be a useless person now? Are you all satisfied? Just as I am disabled, you can rightfully give everything to that woman and her son. That way, you don't have to keep thinking about how to get rid of me. This useless person. Sean's mother committed suicide due to psychological breakdown caused by a mistress taking over. He hated his father deeply. The doctor said that his broke and left leg might face the risk of amputation. His father came out of the ward and happened to meet me. He glanced at me and had no intention of greeting. He took out his mobile phone from his body and walked out while making a call. Why are you here? Did you also come to see my joke? Get out. All of you get out. I don't need your sympathy. He overturned the soup I had served for him and drove me out as well. Perhaps it's been too long. The memories of 5 years ago are also starting to become chaotic. I remember that it was Sean's stepmother who came to find me. This is 50,000 yuan for your mother's surgical expenses. I know you can ask Sean for it. But Miss Sia, regardless of Sean's current bad state, even if he gives you this money, I can still take it back. After all, Sean doesn't have any earning ability yet. Everything he has is given to him by us. I think you must understand this truth. I was silent, looking at the craft paper bag, filled with money, knowing that what she said was right. Sean was in a bad mood because of his leg. He wouldn't listen to anything I said. I said to him, Sean, can you lend me 50,000 yuan? My mother needs surgery for treatment. He laughed at me. Sure, yeah. You won't really be like what they say, trying to get some money from me and then run away. Will you? Your mother was still picking up trash at school 2 days ago. How could she be sick today? You don't even think before lying. At that time, Sean seemed unable to listen to anything. Memories are like a revolving lantern, spinning rapidly in my mind. What happened later? Oh right. Later. That person snatched the 50,000 yuan and went to gamble. I killed him. I accidentally killed him. My mother issued a letter of understanding. It was useless. The lawyer said that someone had bought my crime with money. I knew it was someone from the Cheng family. After hearing that we broke up, his father packed him up and sent him to the United States. These rich people are really good at eradicating all traces. I was sentenced to 3 years in prison. It was also in prison that I found out I was pregnant with Dylan. Because I was specially watched. My days in prison were not easy. It was Dylan who saved me. Because of pregnancy, I was changed to be supervised outside prison. Later, due to good behavior, my prison term was ended early. No one taught me how to raise a child alone. Nor did anyone teach me how to be a single mother. When Dylan was just born, because my diet during pregnancy was not nutritious enough, his health was not very good. He would easily have a high fever in the middle of the night. He would cry until he had convulsions in less than 2 minutes. During those days, I didn't dare to sleep at all, fearing that something might happen to him again as soon as I closed my eyes. Coupled with the pressure of the environment and the increasingly long prison term, I developed a very serious bipolar disorder. Sometimes when I suddenly woke up, I would find myself pacing back and forth in place, talking to myself, with a fierce expression. Although it has gotten much better in the past 2 years. But Mia always stares at me from time to time and says, people with stable emotions are often the ones who are really crazy. 13 I think I must have relapsed again. How did it happen? The day my son Dylan woke up? No, it seems not. Oh right. I remember now. It was the day when Sean came to question me with the paternity test he had privately done at some unknown time. Sean threw the result in front of me. "Joya, Dylan is my son. What on earth have you been hiding from me?" He grabbed my hand and made me look at that report and asked me for an explanation. What the hell did I say in front of my own son? I called him a bastard. Joya. He laughed a little crazily, and a trace of water glistened at the corner of his eye. I fucking called my own son a bastard. I looked at him crying and laughing without saying a word. Nor did I explain. I didn't want to explain. And I couldn't explain either. Later, he took me to get it notarized. He said he wanted everyone to know that Dylan is his son. He wanted to take Dylan away from me. The string that had been tense in my nerves for many days suddenly snapped. The two of us were like that word often mentioned in recent topics, crazy people. Going crazy against each other. And later, it was he who took Dylan to the company in the name of the Chang family to announce the news of the heir. The next day, when I went to snatch the child, the story of me killing my father and going to prison, and the topic of becoming a third party and climbing up with my son were pasted all over the entire Chang group in the form of large posters. And Sean, he was just like an uninformed bystander. He looked at me for a while and then at those big character posters. A look of astonishment and puzzled questioning in his eyes was like a knife that was dissecting my flesh and bones. I was probably really tired. In the end, I collapsed on the way back after promising my son to buy him candy. 14 Sean has stood at the door of the ward for the 32nd time. Mia still won't let him in. Through the light in the ward, Sean sees the figure on the glass. Quiet. Dead calm. Mia rolled her eyes and passed by him. Not feeling reassured, she turned back and instructed the hired caregiver. Don't let this man in under any circumstances. This is already the best way she can get along with Sean. When Zia was just sent to the hospital, Mia almost strangled him. It was only when the medical staff hurriedly pulled them apart that more disputes were avoided. That day, Mia scolded Sean a lot like a machine gun. He still remembers the ferocious look on that girl who is usually kind to others. She said, "Sean, what are you pretending to be so affectionate for? Just looking at your ignorant face makes me sick. If it weren't for you being so troublesome, and the Cheng family interfering, how could Zia have gone through so much? What are you putting on an act of just learning about it? Why? Are you going to say you didn't know? It was all a misunderstanding? Come on. Who are you? The young master of the Cheng family. Not long ago, you bullied Zia one after another. Now you say you didn't know anything about what happened back then." Sean opened his lips as if to say that he really didn't know. After Zia left, he was so angry that he didn't want to inquire about her news anymore. Afraid that he would be reminded of the past and feel sad. But he couldn't say it. Because he remembered that Zia had borrowed money from him back then. What did he say at that time? He said, "Shurya, you are lying. Shurya, you also want to leave me." Sean has been a proud son of heavens since he was young. Surrounded by everyone. After breaking his leg, he has a young master's temper. He was very angry. At that time, someone sent him several photos of Zia walking very close to other boys and teased him. "Oh, my little master with a broken leg. Won't your little canary want to abandon you and find a better branch?" Sean knew that Zia was very beautiful and very attractive. For this reason, he was secretly jealous many times. Although he knew it was on purpose to anger him, he couldn't help but think, would Zia really leave him? Later, when he heard that she wanted to break up with him for 50,000 yuan and that she was with someone else, he was so angry that he laughed. "My dad gave you 1,000,000 yuan to break up with me back then and you didn't agree. Now that woman gave you 50,000 and you agreed? Zia, do you really think I'm a fool? You clearly have fallen in love with someone else and like another man." At that time, he was so overwhelmed by all kinds of messy emotions that he didn't think deeply about the logic of these things at all. He stubbornly believed that Zia wanted to abandon him, because he was about to become disabled. When he finally figured it out later and went to beg her, Who would have thought that she didn't even show up? Now Sean finally knows. On that day. On the day when he begged her to see him in the rainy night. In the corridor, not far away, Cha had been beaten to the point of being on the verge of death by her beastly father. He clearly knew that there were conflicts in her family. But for the so-called male dignity, he didn't even go upstairs to take a look. Even if he had suspected for a moment whether something had happened to her, would everything have a different ending? Remorse is like a huge cage that instantly swallows Sean. Inside the cage, it is pitch dark and can only shine on his own heart. Sean feels that his heart is like being shattered by glass. He suddenly felt unable to breathe. The emotion of self-blame overwhelmed him and weighed heavily on him. He slid down from the wall and sat on the ground. Like self-torture, he repeatedly recalled everything that happened that day. Recalling the details over and over again at that time. When he looked up again, the man was already in tears. Sean, what the hell have you done? The sunlight in the hospital always slants in. Sean finally remembered his promise in the gaps of the dust. Shia, if your dad bullies you again next time, call me and I'll pick you up. He didn't say he would help her or fight. After all, that was her father. But she understood what he meant. Sia walked in front of him, swaying her ponytail. Her voice was clear and crisp, full of the vitality of youth. Okay. If there's anything in the future, I'll call your name first. Sean. 15. I want to see Dylan. Mia refused me. If you don't take your medicine properly, let alone Dylan, even I won't let you see the doctor. I drooped my head in disappointment, but that medicine is really bitter. Mia. Got it. Although she was impatient in her mouth, she secretly took out a string of mini sugar-coated haws from her coat. Here. This is what your son saved for you from his own mouth. Thinking of that little glutton who wanted to eat but thought of saving it for me. I curved my lips and smiled. The sound of the caregiver and the man talking rang out again outside the door. Mia rolled her eyes. Here he comes again. I pretended not to hear and lowered my head to pick at my fingers. I don't want to see him. But some things always need to be made clear. The begonias in the yard began to fall. One piece after another fell on the ground. It may turn into dust and mud before long. Mia and the nurse stood not far away. They were afraid that something might happen to me suddenly. My condition recently is not very good. I heard that when I had an attack yesterday, I accidentally scratched Mia. They all disagreed with me talking to Sean. But I don't have the patience to wait any longer. I looked at the marks on my wrist left by the restraint straps of the psychiatry department. I said to him word by word clearly, I can't give you Dylan. Sean raised his hand in my direction, but in the end he chose to put it down. He said softly to me, Shiria, I'm sorry. If it were 5 years ago, I might have needed this apology that could make people feel relied on very much. Now, you don't have to apologize to me. You don't owe me anything. Just don't compete with me for the child. I am very calm and plain. How could I not owe you anything? He looked at me with a pale face and slightly red eyes. I owe you and my son too much. Shia. Can you? His tone trembled, and he was a little anxious. As if he was afraid that if he missed this opportunity, he would never have a chance to say it again. Can't. I didn't let him finish. Because I know what he is going to say. I took out the tissue that Mia had packed for me as a spare from my body and handed it to him. Called his name gently as before. I said, Sean. Promise me. Don't disturb the life of our mother and son anymore. The moment the words fell, Sean's red eyes burst into tears instantly. His hands trembled slightly. He wanted to reach out and grab me. The words he uttered were full of sobs. Sharia. But I'm not reconciled. Can you give me another chance? I will definitely treat you well. I will make up for my mistakes. Please. Jaya, he cried like a child, clutching his chest tightly, as if he was about to suffocate. As if he still loved me extremely like 5 years ago. But who will bear the hardships I have experienced for me? Sean. You should be more mature. 5 years ago. Because of his immaturity. We broke up. Because of his immaturity. My life trajectory was broken and derailed by his family. I thought about avoiding him. I thought about us never seeing each other again. The reason why I don't want to meet him again is very simple. I don't want to tell my past story over and over again in a bloody way. There is no misunderstanding between us. There are only wrong times and meeting the same wrong people. But only I have endured everything that I shouldn't have endured. And what about 5 years later? He is still so immature. What marriage agreement? What to give Dylan an identity justice? Men are boys until they die. But no girl is always obliged to accompany him to grow up. When I turned to leave, a faint painful wail came from behind. When you are young, it's not wrong to fall in love with anything. When you are mature, it's not wrong to give up anything. Everyone spends their whole life looking for someone with a similar soul to theirs. Later, they find that the only one who fits is themselves. People with kind natures are relatively late maturing and are ripened by bad people. Later, although they become enlightened, they are still kind and sincere, continuously looking for the same kind. The final destination is always to become a only person. 16 Sean no longer comes to the hospital. I also actively cooperate with rehabilitation treatment every day. Because I miss my son. According to Mia, after Sean went back, he seemed to have changed his temperament all of a sudden and suddenly took over Chang's. I don't know what he did. The senior management of the entire Chang's has been completely replaced. It wasn't until the police came to collect evidence that we learned that the accident of Dylan, and all the subsequent coincidences were all caused by his fiancée. It is also inseparable from Sean's stepmother. Readily available wealth always makes people take risks. When the police mentioned this matter, they still sighed. Novels really come from life. There are really such rampant outlaws. The world of rich people is really incomprehensible. They later mentioned the matter of my imprisonment back then. Logically speaking, my mother signed a letter of understanding and consent before she died. I shouldn't have been sentenced. But there are too many people involved in this. Even if the case is reopened, it can only end without a result. I knew this would be the result a long time ago. So I accepted it calmly. But Mia was so angry that she couldn't sleep for several days, muttering, "This disgusting world." 17 Before New Year's Eve, I was officially notified by the doctor that I could be discharged from the hospital. I excitedly hugged Dylan and bought a lot of New Year's goods with Mia. Dylan has grown taller again. I put on new pants for him. He kissed me with a pop and shouted, "Mom, Happy New Year. Happy New Year." Dylan, my son and Mia are making a fuss again. Childish laughter filled the whole warm room. I looked at my son. I remembered when he was just weaned. At that time, he cried so much that his voice was hoarse because he was craving milk. But I couldn't coax him no matter what. The neighbor was disturbed and banged on the wall. "Can you sleep? If this little brat cries again, I'll strangle you." I quickly apologized again and again following the sound. I could only hold Dylan and pace back and forth in the narrow room. At that time, I held him in my arms and swayed him slightly. Just patting and swaying like this. He fell asleep with tears. Naturally, I didn't expect that while swaying, he had unknowingly grown so big. And he gave me a home again. A home that belongs to us. I remembered what my mother said to me before she died. She said, "Home, although it is only one word, is the warmest place to go after experiencing the worldly love, worldly affairs, and the entanglement and noise of worldly people." At that time, I held her hand and cried uncontrollably. And I still didn't understand. After everything is peaceful now, I finally understand the meaning. At this moment, my son, who had just finished making a fuss with Mia, suddenly trotted to my side. He mysteriously asked me to lower my head. "Mom, Dylan has a secret to tell you." I obediently bent down and teased him. "What?" "Our Dylan even has a little secret now." The son was a bit embarrassed. It's that uncle." Which uncle? That tall, fierce uncle. Oh. Sean. What about uncle? The son stood on tiptoe and leaned close to my ear and quietly said 5 words. I was slightly stunned and looked up at the heavy snow outside the window. Then I touched my son's head. Happily welcomed our New Year's Eve dinner amid Mia's shouts. It doesn't matter anymore. Nothing matters anymore. What's important is that everything is getting better. All the important people in my life are getting better. And that's enough. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. A teen Sean's epilogue on the 7th Mid-Autumn Festival that Sean spent alone. He finally couldn't resist and ordered someone to inquire about Zia's news. Then he drove all night to City A. According to the address given by his subordinates, he stood outside an office building for a whole day, and finally saw Zia and Dylan walking and chatting. 7 years have passed. And Dylan has grown a lot. From a little boy to a big boy. He no longer allows people to call him by his nickname Dylan. Except for Zia. Dylan. Mom wants to eat roasted sweet potatoes. Zia buried her entire face in the scarf and looked at her son expectantly with her eyes. Dylan frowned disapprovingly on his small face. No way. Little Aunt said that she asked me to watch you and not buy random things to eat on the road. Otherwise, you won't eat when you get home again. Zia was like a child caught by a parent, and let out a disappointed, oh. Dylan couldn't resist and bought her one without principle. And warned her, you can only eat a little. Otherwise I'll go back and tell little Aunt. Chara immediately looked like a cat stealing fish. With her eyes narrowing into crescent moons. Sean took a step forward and wanted to come out from behind the wall. But when he thought of his previous promise, he silently took back his steps. The secretary watched from behind and was a bit puzzled. These years, President Chang always asked him to secretly inquire about the news of this mother and son. But when he found out, he didn't go. He just stared blankly at the paper with the address written on it. Now that he finally saw the person, he was extremely cautious, as if afraid of being discovered. Is he, the person in power of the Chang family, so unseemly? He didn't know that Sean was just afraid that with this meeting, according to Zia's temperament, it might be the last sight for eternity. Hiding in a corner like a sneaky mouse is better than never seeing again. In fact, Sean has been paying attention to Zia all these years. He knew that she had changed jobs again. Knew that she had changed cities again. Knew that she was being pursued again. He also knew that she had rejected all attentions. At the moment when he got the news for the first time, it would be a lie to say that he wasn't secretly happy. But just when Sean was happily thinking about whether to go see Zia, the secretary reported again what Zia had said when she rejected that person. She said, "Thank you for your liking and appreciation. However, I don't think I need the help of a male character in my life. Undoubtedly. My last relationship was a failure and it also made me suffer a lot. In conventional concepts. I know that many people think that a woman like me who has experienced many things and suffered many pains needs to be loved and saved. But first of all, I don't think this person must be a man. Secondly, I also don't think that the failure of a relationship means I need the emotional comfort of another man. I have a son, a best friend, friends, a job, and workability. And now I don't have the energy and don't want to spend effort to get to know a new person and reestablish a relationship. Any process that requires time to understand or be understood seems too tiring to me. I know that some people will say that your life like this is not perfect. But in the world, the most taboo thing is perfection. Look at the moon in the sky. Once it is full, it will soon wane. Once the fruit on the tree is fully ripe, it will soon fall. Once the past is over, for me, it becomes a tempering. Everything always needs to be a little lacking in order to be lasting. After Sean listened to the secretary's report, his eyes turned red as he smiled. So he didn't dare to disturb Zia again. He just wanted to take a look. The social life after taking over Chang's in these years has long drained his energy. So when he was diagnosed with a brain tumor, he wasn't surprised. He went to do property notarization in person, not long ago and made a will after his death. All his property will be unconditionally left to Dylan. When the secretary sent the notarization certificate, Sia didn't refuse. Sean was a bit surprised. Sia thought this was what he should do. So she gave a message to the lawyer who came to do the notarization. I am no longer the Sia I used to be. And this is what you should have done as a father. After hearing this, Sean smiled in relief. Yes. Only he remained in the late autumn of that year, and was unwilling to wake up. So later, when Sean was lying on the hospital bed, there was no one in front of the bed. In his final moments of consciousness, he seemed to return to the awakening of insects many years ago. At that time, because he was bored, he made a bet with his irresponsible friends to see who could catch up with Sia. The bell of the neighboring department first. He still remembered that the sunlight in the lecture theater was very strong that day. When he asked Sia, "Do you want to be in a relationship with me?" He was even unusually nervous. And the girl in front of him seemed to see through their tricks. Just when Sean thought he was going to fail, the girl blinked at him. "Okay. If you win, you have to give me half of the bet." She smiled at him like a fox. The dimples on her lips were deep. Once sunken, it was the whole youth. But later, they were derailed by fate. Losing the past that can never be returned. Sean almost touched the moon. Unfortunately, the sky was bright.